Vancouver, Sportsnet 650, and Canucks Army. Welcome.
Hey everyone, so as Josh said, I'm Ryan Beach. I cover mostly Canucks prospects and draft prospects for The Athletic, Canucks Army, and Sportsnet 650 here. And I will be hosting the media panel with Jason Brough and Mike Halford, which are my bosses, I guess, at The Athletic. And since we're the media panel this week, and given the week here in Vancouver, we're going to be very positive about everything. We're not going to be too negative and try to make it positive. So we'll start. People from Vancouver obviously know who these two are, but you know, a lot of people from a lot of places, so that they might not know who you are. So let's start with that. Who are you guys, and where did you come from?
Should we introduce each other?
That'd be cute.
Yeah, that'd be nice. Okay, we're not gonna do that. We started doing this 9 years ago with the since dearly departed Curtain blog that was picked up by the Province newspaper. We were there for a couple of years and then spent 6 years covering the NHL for NBCSports.com. And now have bounced back to do stuff locally, radio, TSN 1040, Monday to Friday, 9 to 12. And we also are the co-leads behind The Athletic Vancouver. A reminder to subscribe at the end of this, or during, if you don't want to pay attention to what we're saying, just subscribe is the bottom line there. And that's been 4 or 5 months. Ryan's on board with us, JD, Israel Pair, and I think that covers it pretty much.
Cool. So we'll start easy. How do you think that people can use analytics in mainstream media, and how has that developed over the last 5, 6 years as it's become more prominent?
I think it has to be done if you want to provide good analysis, but it is a bit of a challenge at times. You have to remember your audience, and the audience at TSN 1040 is not all attending analytics conferences, so you have to remember that, and you can't get too bogged down by the numbers. And a lot of the times, you basically just have to say, like, this guy's analytics are good, and this guy's analytics are bad. And I think if you can kind of be creative a little bit, like if you're talking about the Canucks penalty kill, for example, and you can use goals allowed per 60 or something, and you can say something like, look, imagine the Canucks are shorthanded the whole game. When Bo Horvat is out there, they would allow 16 goals, right? And I think, and if Louis Eriksson is out there, they'd allow 7 goals or something along those lines.
And then one of the responses we get is, why would they be shorthanded all game?
Yeah. Right. All right. Today's poll question is, so I think it's, I think what I like about analytics is, like, at the end of the day, the question you're trying to answer is, how do you win? Right? That is kind of the one question that you're trying to answer. And Mike and I, kind of with our show and The Athletic, our underpinning question is, how the hell do the Canucks win the Stanley Cup? Right? So they correlate together, and that's what I like about using analytics.
Do you find it a struggle to kind of make it digestible, and then for people to kind of accept it? Because as you mentioned, the callers call in and say, why would they do that? So is it frustrating to try to convey it and then have people push back?
No, that's the framework part of it. That's part of your job, is that if you understand that the analytics side of things is important, which we both do, it's then imperative for you to try and relay it or explain it or break it down in a way that everyone can understand. So it's more of a challenge than anything else. And it is a challenge, don't get me wrong. It's not an easy way, especially in radio, right? Because you can end up talking over yourself or trying to explain too far, and then all of a sudden people are like, and it's over to the oldies or something like that.
And sometimes it's just not worth it, like to get into the fights with the people. Like, if someone texts in and they say, analytics suck, like, whatever, and you're like, what, are you gonna try and convince that person that they do? Like, you got, and I see that on social media a lot, and we all kind of, not all of us, but some of us will go down these endless arguments with people, and you're like, did I just waste a lot of time trying to convince this person who clearly is not going to be a recipient to my message that analytics works? And it's kind of like, I think I could probably do other better things with my time, and I think you can make an argument, and you can say, take it or leave it. Doesn't matter.
I think the platforms are important too. With The Athletic, it's a lot easier to do deep dives and to dig. We're not hamstrung by deadlines, or no one's asking us for 15 inches of copy, like you can write as long as you want. And you also know that your subscriber base and everyone that's reading is generally there because they're invested on a level, but they want to know more than the basic information that's out there. When we launched The Athletic, Jason wrote the introductory letter that was, questions. How the hell are the Canucks going to win a Stanley Cup? And we're going to go through every means possible.
With grit.
Yeah, with grit for 60. And we're going to try. But that was the thing. So when you're presenting it on that platform, it's a lot more feasible because you can write at length and take the deep dives as much as you want. When we were at NBC, it wasn't even close because we were writing bit-sized columns on all 30 teams. To try and do anything beyond the sort of basic information, it became really difficult.
Was it kind of a goal of The Athletic to kind of use the analytics side to their advantage to kind of get more of a niche market? Because I know, like myself, I'll look at some mainstream media, and we'll talk more about that, is that they just don't have time for it, or the daily, they have to write their daily articles where, The Athletic will give them more, as a reader, gives you more space to read what you want to find. Was that kind of a goal with, whether that's Dello and Dom and myself and JD or something like that?
Well, yeah, I think so, and I think, Myrtle is heading up the Canada operations, and Myrtle's an analytics guy, and I think I don't know if it was a goal, it was more like a strategy. Give people something different than they're getting in the newspaper or on TV segments. So, I think we saw the success of blogs like Canucks Army and that sort of thing, and it was like, that sort of stuff is good work, so let's get those writers.
It is a market thing too. Vancouver's pretty saturated, so The Athletic, as a deeper dive, works a little bit more dynamically here than if Minnesota, for example, is you took Russo and then put him behind a paywall. Now there's no hockey coverage. Like that's a big difference, right? So you're not really altering the coverage per se. You're just taking what's there and kind of purchasing it. And then this is different because it does have to force all the writers that we have on staff to look at things differently. And if you're gonna write, I think I did 2,700 words on Zach McEwen the other day. That's a lot of words for Zach McEwen.
Yeah.
But that's the kind of thing that the platform allows you to do.
That's a short article.
Right.
I'm not gonna name names, but like
one day I'll get through a Canucks Army blog post.
One day.
Yeah, one day.
Why do you think there's some mainstream media in other markets per se that are so anti-analytics and don't have the time of day for it at all?
I don't know. It's hard to paint everyone kind of with the broad brush, and you could ask, why do some people not believe in climate change, and that sort of thing, or why do some people not believe in whatever, and I think with a lot of you gotta have some sort of empathy. You don't have to respect it, but you have to have some empathy for some of the old school writers that have been around for a while, and when they started out, they would write a column and they would be like, done, that's over with. They get no feedback, nothing, no one calling them an idiot or anything like that. And so they started to just believe that everything they wrote was kind of true. And then when they started getting challenged by whether it's internet comments or whether it's people on Twitter getting at them with like a direct avenue to those people, and when you're telling people that you're wrong, there's going to be this natural kind of counter reaction to being, no, you're wrong. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and it also kind of ties back, like, as analytics people, what can they do to try to help those people figure it out? Is there a way to actually engage with these people, or is it just, they're on one side, it's on the other side? I don't want to, put people in bins or things like that, but is there things that, as a group, analytics people could do to kind of get to those people?
I mean, some of them maybe, but I think,
there's going to be people that are going to just resist naturally, and a lot of it is because, look, there's a lot of guys out there that have been doing this for 25, 30, 35 years. They're 50 or 55. They've been in the industry for a long time. They're like, I don't particularly want to learn anything new. I want to get done with my job, get to retirement, and then be the end of it. There's a lot of guys like that. It's just the reality of the situation. At the same time, I do think, like what I was talking about before with regards to if you want to make it your job, there are ways to make this more open and accessible. And I hate saying dumbing it down, but that is what it ends up being at the end of the day. It's like Jason said with the shorthanded time, the entire game, that's something that everyone can kind of understand. And you can put that out there, whether it's going to be received or not, that kind of remains to be seen.
And I think some people, I mean, are you gonna change Don Cherry's mind about zone exits? You know, that's kind of like the extreme, that's an extreme example, but a lot of these guys are, you know, this is a very young group I'm looking at. I'm probably the oldest person in this room, right? And you know, there's some people that, imagine you've gone your whole career believing in certain things like Don Cherry believes in, right? And then all of a sudden, are you gonna just totally change? Like some people might, absolutely, if you've got an open mind. And like what I love hearing here in these things is, you know, I made a mistake, I was wrong. Here are the limitations to my model. And I think people with kind of your mindsets think like that way, but other people don't. They think, this is my belief and I ain't changing it.
Kind of on the flip side of that is that, you know, there's always the argument about like an appeal to authority. You know, some mainstream media,
The scout.
Yes, they develop contacts through their years and things like that, and you know, they'll be told one thing by someone who's in a position to, you know, be paid to do that. Do you think it's kind of a trap that they fall into, and why does it happen?
I'm constantly amazed at how, what's the word, deferential some reporters are to coaches, GMs, and scouts. You know, you have to respect what kind of knowledge these people have been around the game have, but you know, it doesn't mean they're right. It doesn't mean they're right, and I think if you can come up with a good argument that they're wrong, and you believe in that argument, then go with that argument.
Some people really appreciate the access and being able to talk to people. I remember when we were at NBC, we used to have to talk with a lot of the young writers all the time. It's like, that's great that you went out and you talked to an agent and he told you something, but you have to take a step back and try and understand what the agent's motive is for talking to you. Right? I mean, what he's going to talk up his client. He's going to not give you a ton of information other than what he wants to give you. So instead of just running back to your computer and relaying all that and being his mouthpiece, you're going to have to try and look at this critically. And some people don't necessarily want to challenge that because the access is the big thing. You don't want to challenge what you've been told because the access might get pulled back. But the reality of it is that most GMs, most executives, most agents have a motive when they're talking to you. Very few are just like, I really want to talk to a media member today. I just want to get some stuff off my chest. The majority of it is, you know, there's something an angle that they want to play. The savvier ones anyway. There's less savvy GMs out there.
Do you think that kind of the growth of the industry kind of allows people to question those things more, and it creates more of a voice to them? You know, because I think when we talked earlier this week about, you know, prepping for this and saying that how narratives can change. You know, you have the Columbus Blue Jackets winning streak from a few years ago, and Philadelphia's and now, rather than, you know, just accepting the winning streak and riding it, there's going to be questions and points to be like, oh, well, this is inevitably going to end because, you know, we have the data to show that. Does that kind of change the narrative and cause people to be more critical to it, whether that's media, blogs, fans on their own kind of thing?
I'm not sure 100% what you mean by like changing the narrative.
Well, like, so, you know, people get excited. I'll use the Columbus winning streak as an example. You know, people were very excited about Columbus's winning streak, and they were riding, you know, a lot of luck, a lot of things going in their favor, and they were being touted as being a Stanley Cup contender. When then there was a lot of arguments saying, you know what, let's pump the brakes here. Let's say that, you know, they're getting really lucky, and this is probably not going to happen. Either they're going to fizzle out.
I think the analytics folks are very good at saying, let's pump the brakes.
Yeah.
and I think that's, in some cases, that's why some people get rubbed the wrong way by analytics. You know, I had a game last night in my terrible men's league, and we had no business winning this game. We ended up winning 6-0 because we were out there like blocking shots.
How was your horse?
It was terrible. And I was, you know, after the game, it was like, we're all like, man, we had no business winning that, but that was fun. And I don't think, you know, if we had to meet the media afterwards, and the first question was, do you guys think that is sustainable? I'd be like, I don't care if it's sustainable. That was a good win, right? And I think, you know, I think some fans just love to enjoy a winning streak. I think back to the Calgary Flames of a few years ago, you know, and people were saying, oh, it's unsustainable, it's unsustainable. It's like, yeah, that may be, but it's still pretty fun. I think you can get into, like, you don't want to base decisions based on that, right? As far as like signing this guy because he was part of an unsustainable streak. But I think sometimes, and I think analytics people recognize that. I've read that more and more in articles like, you know, JD was writing about Derek Dorsett early in the year, and he's saying it's awesome, like what he's doing, but should Travis Green be putting him out there that much? And the answer is probably no.
The Calgary situation from 2 years ago is a perfect example because you didn't even need numbers to realize that that was totally unsustainable. Like if you watched 5 minutes of what they were doing, like they fall behind 3-0, then there'd be a furious comeback. And it was all sort of, and they rode a roller coaster, and that's inherently fun, and it was enjoyable, and Calgary loved it, and they won a playoff series because of it. But long term, if you're looking at it, yeah, none of that was going to last. Hartley's coaching style was never going to work beyond a 1 or 2 year window, and everyone kind of knew it. And people did point it out, and you had that,
but some people didn't want to.
But some people didn't want to hear it, right?
Yeah.
And I can understand that, because I mean, I'm very much of the mindset. I just said mindset. I've turned into John Tortorella. I'm very much of the mind that sometimes I don't necessarily want to go into a game or a season making this a problem that I have to solve. I do enjoy watching. I do enjoy having a beer or multiple, and sitting down and being entertained by what I'm about to see, and then in the aftermath, kind of, pardon my French, shooting the shit about it. Like that's fun, right? And that's a lot of this what it comes down to. And again, you mentioned JD's, because I think it's when you're talking about Dorsett, he framed it perfectly. It's like, this is a really good story. Like you can't not respect where he's come from and the way that he plays and how he's done it. But the reality is he's probably being overused and overworked, and the numbers don't make sense. And if you frame it like, I don't think there's any problem with that.
But some people will still definitely take.
For sure.
Well, that's what I was going to say, is that I made the joke off the top about how it was, a negative week for media. And do you think that, you can kind of point holes in everything? Derek Dorsett was a good story for the year. Everyone was excited.
In a lot of things that can actually do.
Yeah, it's true. But
I trusted them.
Does it not create like an air of negativity, because you're always finding something that could be wrong? Derek Dorsett was a great story, and in the past we might have been like, yeah, this is really cool. But as you mentioned, JD kind of eloquently put that there's going to be, this isn't going to continue.
Yeah, because I think it comes back to the question, how do you win, right?
Yeah.
And even when you've got a good team, doing media, I don't read a lot of things about like, hey, this is going so well, right? Because a lot of people are just problem oriented. Like, because even if you've got a good team, you've got issues, right? I remember, when the Canucks were good, there'd be a lot of conversation about like the fourth line. How's that? Because you didn't have to worry about the first 3 lines because they were good. So you'd focus on the fourth line because it's how do you get over that hump, or something like that, right? And so I think a lot of people would be like, even when the Canucks are good, you media guys are nitpicking, and it's true, absolutely.
I don't think there should be any sort of like negativity towards nuanced thinking though. Like we do it on the radio all the time. It's like, most of these conversations can go off into 3 or 4 tangents, and rightly so, because it's not a real black and white issue a lot of the time. If you want to try and think about things critically and a little bit more nuanced, that should be encouraged. But it's tough because you're going to get a lot of blowback, because inevitably someone's going to say, you guys are always looking for a problem. You guys are always looking for something wrong. Kind of are.
Yeah. You guys kind of mentioned that you were in NBC for a while, and then you obviously come back here and write for the The Athletic, and it gives you more of a space to kind of critically look. You guys have obviously covered All-Star games, Stanley Cup finals, and stuff like that. How much pressure, is there an ability to think that analytically or deeply at those kind of events, or is it more, just trying to get those clicks because it's, there's so many people, so much focus on it. And, like I said, when we prepped for this, you guys kind of talked about the PK Subban and the Listerine thing that kind of happened, right? So is it just, still trying to get those clicks because that's what drives the money in the industry?
Sure, big outlets like the ones we were at, yeah. There's probably less opportunity. That you'd think there would be more because there's more off days and there's fewer storylines and everything, but the Listerine thing, I wasted a lot of my time in my life covering that. I was ridiculous, and everyone that was there that was doing the exact same thing, we all knew we were feeding the machine. There was no one that was like, I'm really excited to ask another question about this, but all of them were writing for outlets where that was the story. I mean, Listerine jumped on it. They had people handing out packets outside right after it happened. So it was a big deal, and there was a lot.
That has more interest among the maybe not you guys, that
hopefully
has more interest among the general population than say, hey, the Predators don't are missing all their centers. That seems like a problem. Are they going to be able to overcome that? I guarantee if you write something about Preds, how much of the Preds miss Ryan Johansson, and then you put it up against, hey, PK Subban said Sid has bad breath. I'm betting on the bad breath story to just get 100 times the traffic.
Yeah.
You gotta remember, that series went to Game 6, and the only reason we didn't talk about it in Game 6 is because they didn't make Subban available to the media. Otherwise, that story would have lasted the entire series. It was absolutely nothing. It was nothing. After Crosby said, well, he didn't say it to him, and this is the end of the story. It just kept going on and on and on. And you do feed into the machine after a while. It's not a great feeling because we wrote several other things that I thought were better and more compelling because it was a compelling series away from that. But the two most traffic things that we did were Listerine and then a piece that I wrote that it was the nastiest Stanley Cup final since 2011, and it was just embedded with fight videos.
Before you kind of panel for some questions, how do you think the mainstream market is changing? Obviously here in Vancouver it's a bit of a different beast, a different bubble because there's someone like myself, and JD and things like that, but how do you think it's going to change over time with the more adoption of analytics and maybe more younger people here who might be going down that avenue? How do you think it's going to change? And how does it, also I guess to add on that, let you guys rant for a bit, is how is it changing you guys as people who are already incumbent members?
I don't know how much it's gonna change. Like I honestly don't know how much. I think we do, even on TV broadcast, we get a little more analytic stuff. I mean, I even like just like having a shot counter. I wish the Canucks would do that. Like so you can tune in the game if you come in and you're like, oh, it's 2-0 Canucks, but they're getting outshot, 20-6 or whatever.
You can just assume
like,
that.
Well, yeah. Well, you can be like, well, it tells you the story, right? And you asked me how have analytics kind of changed the way I look at the game. I mean, if I'm not watching the game and I want to go on my phone and I want to check out the scores, before I just like check out the score. Now I check out the score and then I go to the shot totals and then I go, well, what explains those shot totals? And then you go to the power plays and that sort of thing. So it definitely does change the way, it's changed the way I look at the game. But I as far as the coverage of and more analytics, and I think there will be slightly more, but I think there's always going to be more focus on the sensational type stories like the PK story because I mean, people like it, and that's what a lot of people watch sports for. It's not a lot of people don't have that underpinning question of like how do you win? It's just they're just following the game and following the soap opera.
Just being a fan.
They're just being a fan, yeah.
So just a reminder, if you have questions, use hashtag VanHAC on Twitter. Our first question comes from Daniel Wagner. What do you do when the analytics contradicts your entire premise for an article and you have a deadline?
Never happens. My eye test is perfect.
I don't think we'd ever roll with a premise without having done the legwork first. Does it happen to you? Oh yeah. Has it? Yeah. Okay. It has happened at times where I've gone 700, 800 words deep, and then I will look for anything to back up what I'm writing. I'm like, nope, this is thin. So, yeah, mostly. Thankfully,
we're not on deadline.
No, that's the thing. We're not on deadline, right? And we're lucky that way. And we never really were with NBC or the province, to be honest. It was more take your time. That's the great thing about The Athletic, not to continually sing its praises, but there is an editorial mandate from the top to like take your time, get it right, do the dive, so you don't end up in a situation like that.
So what you're saying is subscribe to The Athletic.
Yeah, more or less.
Yeah. This one comes from Bill West. Where do you currently draw the line on hockey metrics that are still too new / ambiguous / complicated to share with the general public versus those stats which are near that line but on the share with the public?
I don't know if I'm going to answer this question correctly, but I think I'm always skeptical of the goaltending stats. I think I still haven't been convinced that a coach's system or doesn't impact save percentage. I'm sure some people are thinking of research they've read that'll prove me wrong or whatever. But yeah.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily eliminate anything. I think there's a certain part of your writing where you can present information to a reader and be like, here you go. What do you like? You can put something on the reader at a certain point, right? I mean, you have to use like with the goalie stats, like you could throw, like we did low danger save percentage on a piece we were doing, especially with marksman, and it was like, you know, here's the metric, here's the background behind it. This is probably the closest thing that we're going to have to the eye test and the narrative out there that he lets in a lot of softies. Then kind of correlated that with a bunch of, I think I pulled 5 or 6 videos of goals that eye test wise stunk. They were lousy goals, right? So at that point, you're presenting visual evidence with a stat, regardless of how thoroughly it's been vetted. And you're kind of like, okay, reader, you can decide, right?
And sometimes I think you can just throw out there that some have theorized that this, and whether or not it's been, you know, vetted by the community or whatever, and kind of like accepted knowledge. And you just throw it out there and just like, and you can link to research or whatever, you know?
We got another 2 here. From Jackson McDonald. How do you make statistics easily digestible without losing or distorting the information the stat is providing?
You lose or distort it, mostly. Honestly, I mean, it's part of it. It's like what Jason said, like his metrics are good. I mean, anyone can look at it and be like, what the hell does that mean? But for some people, it's like, oh, he's got good possession metrics, bad possession metrics. You can use sort of generic terminology. It does water it down. It's not great. I think, again, radio is...
You can't just spout numbers. People lose,
yeah,
for sure.
Radio, and like I said, I think I mentioned this earlier, but radio is a lot more difficult because you can talk yourself into a tornado where you're just going around and throwing out numbers, and you can see people's eyes, even though they're not in the studio with you, their eyes glazing over, right? So do you lose, again, some of the finer details? Yeah, probably, but it's, if you want to get it over to a larger, more broad audience, then you have to take that risk, I guess.
From @DerpThrone.
One of my favorites.
Do you think there's a material difference between the average hockey fan and overall hockey culture, and average baseball/basketball fans that breed resistance to analytics? Or is it merely the relative youth of the field?
Hard question. I can't really speak for basketball culture or baseball culture. I think there's probably more acceptance of analytics in baseball. I'd be willing to say that. Hockey culture is
look at hockey.
It's great. It's Don Cherry.
Yeah, look at GMs, right? Isn't I was seeing the pie chart where it was like disproportionately skewed that it's a lot of ex-players that end up in managerial positions, and there's, you know, I don't think it's out of a stretch to say that there's not a lot of young critical thinkers. We were having a conversation the other day with the Canucks. It's that, you know, with the Vegas trade where they picked up 40% of Brassard's contract and moved it along, and the response to it was, Elliot wrote it, wow, that was, a lot of hockey executives found that really confusing. I was like,
really?
Why is that so confusing? Like, or if it's that confusing to you, go hire a guy from Goldman Sachs to do the job for you. Like, I don't understand how that became, it was like they blew someone's mind because a third team got involved in a trade and picked up 40% of a contract. Like, it doesn't seem that bizarre of a strategy, but I think, and that's a very hockey culture thing, that there is an old school rhetoric that goes to the executive, but when it goes down to the fan bases, I'm sure the last part of that question was probably pretty accurate, the youth, right? I mean, not to say, like Jason mentioned, there's a lot of young people in here, but it seems like both leagues have been much more open to embrace, in a lot of different ways, a lot more forward-thinking. The NBA is a lot more forward-thinking in a lot of different ways, not just analytically. And so I'm sure that is somehow correlated to a fan base that is probably skews a little younger.
I think I have just one more here. From Oliver. Do you have a favorite YouTube channel on NHL analytics?
I do not.
Not yet.
Suggest some for me.
Yeah. We'll get it, Oliver, yeah.
All right, does anyone have any questions on the floor that didn't want to use that hashtag? Everyone probably wants to lunch now, so.
Yeah, fair enough.
We got one.
I just tweeted actually, but for someone looking to get into hockey media, is it necessary to be analytics focused, or could like a old school traditional person get into media nowadays? It just seems like anybody who's getting into media kind of has to be analytics focused.
Do you think it has to be a combination of it now?
I don't think you have to. I mean, it depends what you want to do. If you want to be a TV host, no. Like, you just have to be good at hosting a panel. If you want to be an analyst, I'd recommend it, or, you know, because I think as analytics become more accepted, then you better be keeping up or you're not going to look very good.
I've seen a lot of young guys and girls break in and just grinding at the level of getting contacts. Like, I don't think anyone actually physically uses a Rolodex anymore, but we've worked with a lot of it. That's a really good way in, is talking to as many people as you can and getting those contacts. I mean, guys, I've seen people do it at the junior level, talking to bird dogs and talking to guys that are just getting started out as agents. It's Shams, the NBA guy that was Woj's chief rival. I mean, if you read his backstory, that's exactly what he did, right? I'm sure he's got an analytical lean when he would actually sit down and write, but his avenue in was go talk to people and make the contacts and make the connection. All it is a grind, really. JD was telling me he's written, what, like 20,000 words this week long. Yeah, but, and that's all it is at the start, is you're just grinding as much as you can and as often as you can, and then it doesn't matter necessarily what your focus is, just hard work, I guess.
Any other questions?
In terms of sort of the next steps for NHL media coverage, where do you see, I guess, who's the player that you see or potential players that you see that potentially can break out of that mode of players who have coverage dictated by like the media as opposed to them dictating the coverage? So the example I use is LeBron James in the NBA, who has his own podcasting platform, is really out there in terms of just really controlling and corralling the message around his own persona and brand. I know PK Subban has probably been one at the foremost for it, but I think he's probably, on the downside of his career. Who do you see as like the next person to sort of take that mantle?
Yeah, that's a good question. PK would be the guy, and I would still say. I mean, he's been very cognizant.
PK's already on the downside of his career, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's tough.
That's straight for Shea Weber.
Yeah. It's interesting that you bring him up because I think everyone always talks about how cognizant he is of his brand and building himself up. And I wish. And
that was a big problem.
Right.
It was. I mean, and then we get back to hockey culture. There.
Yeah. So the postscript to that story in Nashville was that I can't remember. It was either before Game 3 or Game 4 when he walked in with all the Listerine gear. He had the packets and the bottles and everything. Was he had built a tiny shrine in his locker of all the different Listerine products. I didn't go over so well in the room, and two of the Nashville Predators' more veteran players quickly shot that down. And not coincidentally, after that, PK Subban was not made available to the media for the rest of the Stanley Cup final. So you can infer from that what you will about hockey culture and me first. And I don't think at any time prior to that final, he thought that he was going to somehow land a Listerine deal. I think it was just organic and it just happened.
I think it might have.
Maybe. But I think what happened was he said something and it kind of, for lack of a better term, went viral, and his personality and his brand awareness was to let's run with this and let's see what happens.
Well, that's a good question. Who's going to be next?
I have no idea who would be next. Like,
it's going to be McDavid. I don't think it's going to be McDavid. It's going to be Austin Matthews. I don't think it's going to be Austin Matthews.
They're just inherently boring people when they talk. There's nothing entertaining.
They're also just focused on hockey.
Yeah,
they honestly don't want the hassle. They don't want it. You have to want it. You have to want to be able to go out there and have a message. You can't have it like hoisted on you, right? Like, go be this guy. It's like, well, I'm not that guy. I just want to play hockey. And I think if someone just wants to play hockey, then they should just be allowed to just go play hockey.
Alrighty, last call. Any more? All right, thanks, Jason and Mike, for coming out and having the panel. Thanks, everyone.
So yeah, that was our last panel before lunch. We'll take about an hour break. We'll be back here about 1 o'clock, and we'll start with our next session of talks.